Welcome back to Ali Amashtas and Martin Despang's show Urban Transcendence. Today we're going to show you the second part of the POE post-occupancy evaluation trilogy of Keiki gardens in kindergartens. Ohana and the Keiki have been identified as a key component for transcending and transforming urban life around the globe. Whereas in most native societies, living together, families in a harmonized, balanced lifestyle was easy. In the post-industrial societies, it's not that easy anymore. So how can urbanity and architecture help? In the back, you can see a project where we as architects got the closest to that as ever, as we were able to combine both a community grocery store and a kindergarten. So places where people can live that life in harmony and in balance of human activities as close as you can. We're not going to show you the community grocery store. We're going to walk by it, and we're going to start with introducing to you the kindergarten.
So, Frau Zilter, vielen Dank, dass Sie uns hier empfangen. Es ist wahrscheinlich ein bisschen laut jetzt mit den Hintergeräuschen, aber das kennen die Nutzer, die Zuschauer schon. Ja, vielen Dank für Ihre Zeit und vielleicht erzählen Sie uns einfach ein bisschen was über sich und über Ihre Einheit.
Ja, unsere Kindertagesstätte ist ja neu erbaut worden vor 7 Jahren mit einem Ersatzneubau. Und bislang, vorher waren wir seit 1969 an dieser Stelle, also waren schon über 40 Jahre bei der Bau und das muss halt abgerissen werden. Und da wurde halt überlegt, einen Ersatzneubau zu schaffen. Wir sind von der ABO, Träger ist die Arbeiterwohlfahrt, Region Hannover e.V. und das Gebäude ist über die Stadt Hannover.
So you're saying you've been here ever since the very beginning of the institution, that is 1969. This is, by the way, 3 years after I was born. And so you had a building here before that was built at that time that we're going to get to next. And this building here then replaced the previous one and was built 7 years ago. And you belong to the, and that's kind of tough to translate, probably say worker welfare organization, I would say, I suppose. But the client of the building was the city of Hannover. Ja, und vielleicht jetzt ein bisschen was zum Neubau.
Ja, der Neubau, also es ist eine Grenzbebauung, es ist direkt an dem Weg. Dadurch haben wir mehr Garten außen hin bekommen und die vorherige Kita waren ja mehr so wie so ein Barackenbau, weiß verkleidet und hatten wir ganz oft auch Graffiti-Malereien, ständig eigentlich musste es immer wieder neu angemalt werden. Und das ist jetzt nach 7 Jahren, also kann man sehen, das ist ja noch nicht passiert, das ist sehr schön, also haben wir überhaupt keinen Ärger damit und es ist auch gut, es hält sich natürlich kein Profil wieder drauf. Ist ja nicht interessant zu malen und man kann halt gut von innen, kann man gut hinausgucken, das glaubt man vielleicht gar nicht, wenn man jetzt so davor steht und reinguckt, aber von außen kann man auch überhaupt nicht reingucken. Ja, also das kann man nicht weiter sehen, das ist eigentlich ganz schön.
Someone's just by. So this is interesting time here of the day. This is when the parents of your colleagues kind of leave, so we can see them kind of as people in the distance here. To explain the building, why the building is the way it is, this facade here is zero lot line. So we negotiated with the authorities to build right at the edge. The previous building was in white plaster and got pretty vandalized and graffitied and stuff like that and tagged. So here, due to the nature of this kind of louvered wood, first of all, graffiti would never really appeal, would never stick to it, and that's probably one of the reasons why
people never did it. However, we could also think maybe for another reason, maybe because the building doesn't want to be a facade. The building is more like a fence, which was actually the original. And then you say what you also appreciate is that there are some penetration, so there's some windows in there, which actually this building which we're going to get to next, which technology is built to, it actually wouldn't need windows. But you appreciate the windows, and the windows, the slats that are louvered over the windows allow you to look outside, which you say it's hard to imagine being here, but once we get inside we can check on that. Whereas on the outside you can't look inside, so you very much appreciate it.
Was für die Bürger sehr erstmal gewöhnungsbedürftig war für die Umwelt. Die sagten natürlich, oh, das ist da eine Kindertagesstätte und das sieht ja aus wie ein Gefängnis, weil die Fenster ja nicht zu sehen sind. Also sie konnten sich damit überhaupt nicht anfreunden und kamen auch teilweise rein und haben gesagt, was ist das, wie ist das gebaut worden, warum ist das zu? Aber der Sinn und Zweck ist halt, also man kann damit gut leben, es ist auch hell genug innen drin und man hat so das Gefühl, wenn man drin sitzt, ja, aber es wird nicht reingeguckt, so, ne? Man ist so geschützt, man kann da geschützt drin arbeiten. Also
this is very valuable what you say, because what we do here is post-occupancy evaluation, so we look at buildings after they are built and see how they work. And you are very honest, and that's one of the things that's very important with POE, that one is honest, it doesn't just say the nice things. So you say that the people in the neighborhood, they weren't quite used to what they saw, and in fact some of them were outraged or even offended, and they even came to ask you what that is, and they compared it to a prison. They said, these poor kids, they have these bars in front of their windows, is this a prison? But you took the time to always tell them the reason behind, and then they left with a better awareness of it. And you say it's very practical, it's very useful, and the test of time had sort of proven that it was the right decision to go that way. So I think with that we're probably going to move on and check the building out from the other sides and of course as well from inside. So, ja, jetzt sind wir nach innen gegangen.
Ja, das ist unser Küchenbereich, das ist unsere Küche. Und wie man sieht, kommt noch genug Luft, auch Licht auch durch. Das ist noch ziemlich hell, auch durch die Holzspaliere. Und hier oben unsere riesen Dunstabzugshaube, das ist oben, was wir auch von außen auf dem Dach oben gesehen haben. Das, wie die Kinder immer sagen, das ist unser UFO ist da gelandet. Hatten erst gefragt, was ist das? Das ist halt das Lüftungssystem, also die Lüftung halt von der Küche. Eine riesengroße Dunstabzugshaube. Das wird auch gut.
Great. So you explain that this is the proof of evidence for what you talked about outside, that there comes enough light and actually air as well through the slats, so there's good daylight efficiency in here, and there's good privacy and intimacy and also protection. You could probably say at that point here that this building here has a very special technology we're going to talk about, that usually due to that system which is called Passivhaus, you wouldn't make windows here. But in this case we made windows, so you also have the ability to actually open the windows and even leave them open at night during the hot summer, so that actually the air could sort of go through at night and help with the night cooling. But more importantly, talk about the space here, which is the kitchen. And the kitchen has this here that takes the air out when you cook here. And in the previous position, the audience might have seen that big machine. It's interesting that children are always very curious, so they asked you what that is, and they said, what's that UFO, what's that flying sauce out there? So you explained this is actually the technology, the equipment to allow this to be run as a kitchen, also dann zu diesem Konzept der Küche relativ interessant.
Ja, also es ist, wir brauchen halt auch die große Dunstabzugshaube, weil bei uns extra gekocht wird, für 70 Kinder frisch zubereitet, frisch gekocht. Also wir kriegen kein Essen angeliefert, wird alles frisch zubereitet. Wir haben auch 2 Kochfrauen, die das vorbereiten. Und es ist natürlich viel, viel schöner, als wenn man das Essen geliefert bekommt. Es ist bei uns, bei den ARO-Kindergärten hier, Region Hannover ist das noch so, bei vielen, ganz vielen Kindergärten ist das nicht mehr so. Die kriegen meist durch den Einsparung der Personalkosten das Essen geliefert. Aber es hat halt sowas von Familie. Die Kinder kommen morgens rein, die riechen halt, was gibt es zu essen, die kommen. Eine ganz witzige Situation kann ich dazu nochmal schildern, ist, wenn das elektrische Küchenmesser, das darf man eigentlich gar nicht sagen, weil die Kinder dürfen ja nicht vorher naschen, aber das elektrische Küchenmesser angeht für das Fleisch zum Aufschneiden, stehen schwuppdiwupp an der Tür 3, 4 Kinder, hören das und gucken, oh Evelyn, was machst du Leckeres, ne? Und kriegen dann halt ein Stück auf und dürfen probieren. Das ist halt das Familiäre, dass die Kinder wissen, was gekocht wird. Und sie essen es einfach besser.
Ja.
Ne, als wir hier neu gebaut worden sind und ausgelagert waren in der Schule auch, haben wir Essen beliefert bekommen und es ist teuer und die Kinder essen es einfach nicht.
So that's a very important aspect, I think. The whole show is about, you know, Ohana and the Keki, so family and children, and food is also a very important part of the show here and how it relates to the built environment. So you basically say that when you had to move out during the construction time, you were in a school and food was delivered. And it's more expensive, it's less tasty, it's probably less healthy. You say here, you really we fought for that you get a real kitchen, that you do real cooking. You have 2 cooks, and who basically, and it's an event for the children. They come into the building, they smell the preparation of the food, and you say, which is almost not supposed to be said, but in Hawaii, we're okay with it. When the electric kitchen knife runs, that gives the children a sign, and they come and they're curious and say, what do you have, what kind of yummy stuff you have today, so they can taste a little bit. So it's a very, very kind of social part, and it's very important for, you know, all over the world, in Hawaii, in America, and in Germany, we have a problem with obesity, with Dickleibigkeit, with Fettigkeit, and here I think that also contributes and helps just for a healthy lifestyle, to cook fresh and every day.
Ja, und die Familien, die Eltern kommen ja manchmal auch gar nicht mehr dazu, Mittag zu machen, weil sie arbeiten. Die Kinder sind den ganzen Tag bei uns in der Einrichtung und dann ist es schon wichtig, auch einmal warmes Essen zu bekommen.
Ja.
Also wir kochen insgesamt für 70 Kinder und dann haben wir noch die Mitarbeiter, die mitessen, teilweise, nicht alle. Das ist ausgegangen.
Nee, that's only the screen went away, but thanks for watching out. Technology, you never know.
Und dann kommen halt Seniorenesser noch aus unserem Stadtteil, aus dem Stadtteil Marienwerder, und können hier bei uns mitessen. Und zahlen halt für das Mitessen, bleiben dann aber auch hier, können hier zusammen mitessen.
Okay.
Und essen teilweise mit den kleinsten Kindern, die wir hier haben, also die unter 3-Jährigen, weil die auch separat essen. Nicht mit den Größeren zusammen, und die essen dann halt zusammen und alt, und das ist immer ganz schön.
I think it gets more exciting. We really learn from this show, probably more than from any of the other ones. That you say, cooking is also in the way this society developed, that most people, both parents, have to work, so they just don't have the time to cook anymore. So this is important for the children to have that family tradition here in the kindergarten. And so you cook 70 meals, and for 70 people. Actually, your 60 children and your colleagues, but you also cook a little more and invite the elderly from the neighborhood, and they pay for the food and they eat here, and they eat with the very little ones. So that's another reconnection to how, you know, in many societies, in Hawaii, the ahopua, that's how society works, that, you know, families, generations live together, work together. And that's not possible in the post-industrial days anymore, but your facility helps to reconnect that, bring the generations together, bring the people together around the activity of eating and food and lunch. That's excellent. All right, so yeah, let's move on in the building.
Wo befinden wir uns nun?
Ja, nun sind wir in unserem großen Flur, der sehr weitläufig ist, auch sehr schön hell ist durch die Oberlichter. Und vor jeder Eingangstür, also vor jeder Gruppentür. Und hier ist halt, hier können die Kinder auch spielen, also hier darf auch gespielt werden. Sind die Kinder draußen, haben ihre Sitzecken, ich weiß nicht, ob man das gerade sieht.
Das ist schön.
Setzen sich auch gerne hin, und es ist nicht so typisch wie so für einen Kindergarten, wenn man reinkommt in das Gebäude. Das wird uns auch ganz oft gesagt, dass das ist ja weitläufig. das ist ja schön und das strahlt so eine gewisse Ruhe aus. Warum auch immer. Also durch das Holz, durch die Helligkeit ne, wird den Flur finden eigentlich alle immer ganz toll und schön und großzügig. Gar nicht eigentlich so wie für einen Kindergarten, für eine Kindertagesstätte gemacht.
So you explained that for most people it's kind of a big aha effect, especially coming from outside, but it's more austere, kind of closed appearance. When they come in, they're surprised how open, wide of the space it is, how flushed it is with daylight for the skylights, and the skylights are always in front of which I call the living rooms for the children. So it's also kind of a natural wayfinding that always where the slice of light is actually where the group is. So you say you also, and that's something that we did as designers, that every square footage here in the building is prescribed by funding and by code and by program by the client. So the group, the playrooms have to have 50 square meters and not 49 and not 51. So the only space where the architect can play is the hallway, because the hallway is not prescribed. And you appreciate that, you say, because it's a little wider, it allows people to use it for circulation, but at the same time the children use it for playing. So it's not just wasted space for circulation, it's occupiable space, usable space for human occupation. And you say for all these reasons, and probably also the materiality of wood cladding on the walls, it has, which you say it surprises you, it has sort of a calming, almost a tranquil character. And we're not sure, he said, how much now they moved away, but when you were pointing out, there were two children sitting in the little Alva Auto lounge chairs and eating an ice cream. So that was a perfect proof of evidence for what you explained about the space, that the kids like to lounge here. All right, so let's move on to the living rooms. I guess since we talked about them already. Ja, wo sind wir jetzt?
Ja, jetzt sind wir in dem Wohnbereich der Kindertagesstätte. Hier ist eine Dreiviertelgruppe. Hier wohnen 25 Kinder im Alter von 3 bis 6 Jahren und von 8 bis 14 Monaten eine Dreiviertelgruppe und 2 Erzieherinnen wohnen hier. Der Raum ist natürlich auch schön hell, wie man sieht. Das Holz ist schön hell. Hier hinter sind die ganzen Schränke eingebaut. Also, auch schön verdeckt, dass man nicht so viel sieht, ne? Und auch ganz tief liegend, also von außen kommt da ja die Garderobe dagegen und innenliegend, also passt ganz viel rein in den Schränken. Und die Oberlichter sind auch sehr schön, dass das Licht durchfällt und das Licht natürlich auch in den Flur durchfällt. Und das ist eigentlich ganz, noch viel schöner ist das in der Winterzeit. Also wenn so Adventszeit ist, dann ist das so heimlich. Da kann man schön auch Lichterketten oben ran machen und kann von beiden Seiten es benutzen. Und das Licht fällt ja auch in den Raum von den Oberlichtern vom Flur. Also ist alles sehr hell gestaltet. Und außen wie innen halt überall diese Holzwände. Holzbauweise. Und das macht das Ganze so gemütlich.
So you explain, it's interesting you use the same term that I use, living room, der Wohnraum für die Kinder, because this is where they spend most of the day. You said from 8 to 2 p.m. Bis 14 Uhr?
Yeah, bis 14 Uhr.
So, significant part of the day, and this room is for 25 children, and they're age 3 to 14, right?
Yeah.
So quite a range of children, so the very little ones and older ones. And there are 2 colleagues of yours who work with them, who live with them. You also nicely use the word they live with them, so this is the living room. And so this room here is, as I said in the hallway, it was prescribed in the square footage. It's just by code, you know, or by law or by financing. It's 50 square meters, 500 square foot. And the room is designed in a way that, with very simple means, we should probably at that point also say that it was a relatively small budget, the building, so we had to come up, make something out of nothing, so to speak. And regardless, what's important to give it a warm, livable feeling here, as you explained in this living room. It's a wood frame structure, and it's clad with wood on the outside and on the inside entirely. And so you say that especially in the more dark winter times, because we're living here in temperate climates, we have high summer now, but there will be soon over, and there will be pretty cold winter. There's a little anecdote, we should come to that later on. But so in the winter time, you say it's very, very beautiful that when you have the lights on, that's reflecting on the wood walls, and there's all the Christmas decoration that gives the building a glow and a warmth, as you say. Functionally, along this wall here, outside are the wardrobes, and on the inside are all these cabinets, closets. So there's a lot of storage space in here. Can never be enough. You wish you would have more, but at least there is some here. And they're only 6-7 feet high to then leave the rest visually open. Acoustically, it's glazed, so you don't get any noise from the hallway, but visually it's open. So once again, the daylight and also the artificial light can travel through, and there's no disconnect. So it kind of combines the hallway with the living room. And once again, you point out the strategic wayfinding skylights that you can see pretty well in the distance, that in fact sort of are a markation of where the entrance to the living room is.
Und unsere Decke, unsere Sauerkrautdecke ist ja auch nochmal zu erwähnen. Das ist natürlich, schluckt ganz viel Schall. Also es ist, merken wir ganz doll im Gegensatz zu unserer alten Kita, dass man viel ruhiger arbeiten kann, dass die Kinder dann nicht so laut werden, gegenseitig immer lauter werden. Also das war auch mit sehr viel Skepsis erst bedacht, weil alle gesagt haben, oh, das ist doch noch nicht fertig, das sieht doch noch so unfertig aus, ne? Wird die noch übergestrichen oder so. Aber es hat sich auch bewiesen, dass sie wirklich auch schön ist und auch schön zu leben ist, also dieses Natürliche halt auch zu leben heißt.
That's great. So you point another very important aspect of well-being, of comfort in your building is acoustics, because if you imagine having 25 little exciting noises and voices in a room, that can get pretty stressful for the ones working with them once you don't have the right acoustical device in the building here. So here the acoustics are solved by this material, which is a wood wool system. Actually, I can say that little anecdote that we discovered that for the very first kindergarten that we showed in the last show. And at that time it was an American system, it's called Tectum. And at one point Americans stopped importing that to us Germans, so we had to figure out something. So this is a substitute, a Heraklit, as the manufacturer. And you point out that some of the first visitors and parents were questioning once it gets finished because it looks unfinished. And that was actually our intention, because the methodology here is to leave everything as natural as you can, which has one benefit, which is you don't have any other treatments, which supposedly can have chemicals, and there's outgassing, so you avoid that. But which you nicely acknowledge is also leaving things pure, just leads to a more positive, a more charming experience in the space. And it works perfectly, as you say, because the entire roof is clad with that, and really takes away, especially these kind of high-end parts of the noise which children tend to have by nature. So it helps very much. So once again, you're supporting, after 7 years, the idea of natural materiality. And maybe we should talk about, because we also want to talk critically, maybe about floor at that point, vielleicht ein bisschen ruhig kritisch über Fußboden reden.
Ja, das ist, also von der Fußboden ist halt schön, aber also von der Farbe her passt es sehr gut, das Braun ist sehr schön, Aber es ist auch sehr nicht sehr strapazierfähig. Also man hat viele Striemen, viele von den Stühlen, von den Tischen, wenn das hin und her geschoben wird. Aber,
so the floor is basically linoleum, which is almost the default material for kindergartens. And the choice was, which you nicely acknowledged, was to almost sort of refer to the forest ground outside, which is brown, kind of brings it inside, so you kind of blur the boundaries. There's another means to blur the boundary between the inside and the outside. The downside, as you say, because of the nature, it's more dark than bright. You see a lot of scratches whenever a chair kind of moves. You see the scratch there, so there's always kind of the balance or the conflict potentially between maintenance and occupation, I guess, especially in buildings like kindergartens where there's a lot of wear and tear on a daily basis. Probably one of the typologies where you have the most wear and tear, also die größten Herausforderungen an Beanspruchung an Gebäude ist bei Kindertagesstätten. So I think with that the audience is probably excited now from where all the light comes from, so we're probably going to turn around and show them. Jetzt umgedreht und jetzt gucken wir wohin.
Ja, und nach außen, zum Außengelände. Da sieht man halt, wie großzügig der Raum auch ist, wie viel Fläche man hat, wie viel Fenster, wie viel Lichter, wie viel Licht einstrahlt. Und dort oben sieht man auch die Lüftungsschächte oben an der Decke. Also es ist auch ein Passivhaus-Kita, durch ein Lüftungssystem, also durch kein Heizungssystem, sondern durch ein Lüftungssystem halt erwärmt, beheizt, und durch die Sonneneinstrahlung kommt halt die Wärme herein und durch die Bewegung der Kinder. Wenn die Kinder sich bewegen, wenn viele Kinder im Raum sind, wird es auch gleich danach wärmer. Also das merkt man immer, wenn man montags im Winter jetzt reinkommt, dann ist es noch kühl, aber so wie man in Bewegung ist, Kinder sich bewegen, wird es wärmer.
So explain, we are in the living room and now we turned around, now we see where all the daylight comes from. But the source for the daylight is the sun, or it's the sky, and the sun is out there or not. So you have light anyways all the time, but you have sun. And in the winter here in this climate zone, the sun is rather low in the winter, and the trees that you can see outside are deciduous trees, the Laubbäume. And when the leaves are down, and the sun is primarily heating the space here. And then there is an air ventilation system, which is no air conditioning. I call it AV, it's air distribution, and it takes the solarly harvested warmed up air from this room and shares it with the other rooms who are actually not. And you also point out that you also see, you fully understood, which always impressed me from day one, that the concept that it's, and you were a pioneer, that also the little bodies of your little children are also little furnaces. So they also, you say when you come in on a Monday morning in the winter, it's cooler, and once the children sort of unfold their activity and bounce around, they basically warm up the space, warming up the space. And I can't help myself sharing an initial experience that impressed me very much on your leadership when the institution was just finished, and it was the first winter. It was one of the coldest winters ever. And if we want to be honest, and we should, what the problem is in a system like that, which we call Passivhaus, is always the technology. So this has to be adjusted and to be operated and maintained. So it wasn't quite adjusted yet. And so the client, meaning well, came and brought little electric heaters from the next Home Depot, which you were shocked and politely but strictly pointed him to take them away again, because that would confuse the children, because you were aware of the mission. And you basically called the parents and said, this is the situation. We're going to have 2 degrees Celsius that we're going to bring up the temperature, so please bring a second pair of sweater. Please bring a little bit more food, because we're going to feed the furnaces, as in the old days with the coal, into the fireplace, and that basically worked. And I think the phenomenal part of that was that you raising the awareness not only of the children but of the parents. You once told me that they go home and tell the parents, what's this furnace you're going to have? You know, we don't have that in the kindergarten. So there's a tremendous educational
kind of mission that you're aware of, and I'm always very proud of you how well you do that and explain to everyone. And it's a prototype. The prototypes can never be perfect, so there are a lot of things that aren't perfected, but you don't hold that against the mission. You always say, okay, problems are problems, and you've always been very honest, and you are honest, ongoing, and explain to the architect, whenever you design another one, please think of this, think of that. But in the bigger scope, you say, you know, it's important to stay on the mission, because this is the generation that will make the, which we call Energiewende here in Germany, which is the energy shift, where Germany goes away from nuclear energy and from fossil energy to renewable energy. And this, you know, your children is the generation that's going to make that change. So it's huge. So maybe we go to the little Differenzierungsraum, and you talk about that a little bit.
Ja, das ist unser Differenzierungsraum. Dieser Differenzierungsraum ist an jedem Gruppenraum dran und ist halt ein ganz schöner, offener, heller Raum. Hier können die Kinder für sich alleine spielen. Hier kann die Tür zugemacht werden. Und das Schöne ist, man sieht die Kinder halt. Es ist alles voll Glas, also man kann durchschauen. Aber es schluckt ganz viel Lärm auf. Also wenn hier 13 Kinder zusammen spielen, sind die schon mal nicht in dem Hauptraum und das nimmt ganz viel Lautstärke auf. Und es ist natürlich ein wunderschöner Raum, wenn man rausguckt. Also wir hängen gar keine Fensterscheiben mehr, weil das war vorher so üblich, dass ganz viel an die Fenster kam. Das braucht man bei solch einem Ausblick nicht mehr, weil man das Grün halt sieht und das auch beruhigend auf die Kinder wirkt.
Okay.
Am Anfang, als wir ganz neu hier waren, haben wir hier unsere Frühstücksecke gemacht, dass die Kinder hier gesessen haben und nach oben, wenn sie gefrühstückt haben, haben sie nach oben im Himmel gucken können und konnten die Flugzeuge sehen. Und, also es ist eine schöne Wohnqualität für die Kinder.
Great.
Das ist ganz schön.
So you explain, this is all stuff that's new to me, and we talk a lot, but these parts I've never heard, so that's great for me too. So you call that a very special, almost bay window, you could say. Some of the, you know, San Francisco buildings have these bay windows, this Zaka. And you say this is like it, and it's the programmatic name for that is Differentiation Room, which is kind of an iffy term, but it's the way it is. But what it means is that you have a separate room within the big living room where you can close the door and there could be 13 children, you said, for example, could be in here and being heavily engaged in a game with a lot of noise, which doesn't distract the other ones here there, so you can sort of play on two stages, so to speak. And at the same time, you still have visual connectivity, which is important for supervision. And this is the room that's the most flush with daylight. And you said different to previous, you know, generations, you're not over decorating any glass anymore, because you said what you have here on the outside, you can't beat that. You were explaining that at the beginning, you were having the breakfast with the children here, and they were looking up into the sky, and you can see the birds and the planes and stuff like that. So you say it's a space with an extraordinary living room quality. So.
Es eignet sich auch wunderbar, einen Kreis, also man braucht gar keinen Stuhlkreis zu machen. Man setzt, also das sehen Sie
Maybe you do it here.
Die Bänke sind gleich als Sitzplätze, also man kann die Kinder zusammentrommeln, sagen, setzt euch alle mal hier hin zu, die sitzen gleich im Kreis. Es braucht nichts umgebaut werden. Ne? Und schon hat man, und auch dieses Enge dann, ne? Man braucht nicht so laut zu schreien, man schont die Stimme. Ne? Also der Raum wird ganz viel ausgebaut.
So we acknowledge, according to our principle of design, to have things multi-purpose. Technically, you need a windowsill, and we build it deeper so it becomes a bench. You say you have gatherings, so the children just sit in the windows and in a circle, so it's almost like the powwow or the tipi, like the Native Americans that gather around space, and it's a very intimate space too. So I think now how this logically, makes sense in the design from the inside out. I think the audience got a good idea. Now we go outside to conclude the show, and they can see how that then sort of what sense that makes on the outside. Zum Ausklang.
Ja, von außen halt gesehen sieht man jetzt hier unsere, also die Rundung auch von außen mit den Bänken, die Sitzbänke, auch wieder passend für die Kinder. Hier kann sich halt auch schnell gesammelt werden. Hier setzen sich die Kinder auch von außen hin und diese Nischen halt, dieses runde, wellige, gebaute, was sich ja in allen Gruppenräumen widerspiegelt, wird auch schön als Rückzugmöglichkeit, also zum Sitzen der Kinder, zum Essen, wie im Sommer essen die Kinder auch draußen. Und man ist halt so ein bisschen abgeschottet, ein bisschen heimelig. Ja. Ja, die hohen Fenster sind halt, die Glasfront ist halt bis oben hin und was man oben sieht, das weiße Vorbau ist halt die Dämmung der Decke. Und der Schutz, das wurde halt nachträglich auch eingebaut, unsere Jalousien, die auch passend von der Farbe her halt so ausgesucht sind, dass es auch zum Holz dazu passt. Ja, und das ist, aber wir haben halt ganz viel Schatten auch durch unsere Natur, durch unsere Bäume, weil wir hier an diesem Standort schon so lange sind, seit 69. Da haben wir ja den großen Baumbewuchs und die spenden uns eigentlich am meisten Schatten und sagen wir am schönsten. Und die Sonne erst, die Wärme erst gar nicht so rein in die Bäume.
Yeah, I think that's an important lesson as well. First of all, you explain that sort of what you see in here is the obvious sort of benefit from the undulation in the plan on the inside is that you create the same kind of ledge where you can sit on the outside. And originally in the design, we undulated this facade to maximize the exposure to the sun, so you get more solar gain. And as an effect on the side, but as important, you create this kind of intimacy of niches for the children, so it's kind of their terrace, their lanai, as in Hawaii say. And you explain the building technology, that the windows are higher than they go over the ceiling, so that little white part at the top is actually the thickness of the ceiling that insulates you so well in the winter. And as far as summer overheating protection, you explain at the very left, you can see that some mechanical shading has been added, but you also share that you prefer the natural one, which is the beautiful substance of trees you have here ever since 1969, as you explained at the very beginning. So very mature green. There's some trees that got replanted, so at the end the whole facade will be naturally shaded, and the leaves are there in the summertime, give you a wonderful feeling of sitting under the tree. And in the wintertime the leaves are off and heat the whole building. And also I will at the end share another thing that I will never forget what you said when there were complaints or discussions about how warm can it be in the summer. You concluded that discussion with saying, well, when it's really too hot, we go outside and we sit under a tree anyways. And I think this is a great attitude towards the pioneering of Passivhaus technology, not to demand and claim everything, but basically say we got to work on this, we got to be flexible, we want to save the world, and for that we got to do something, all of us together. So I think this is makes me thank you very much for your time and explaining the building to me as the architect, and I think you did it way better than I can do it, and this is, I think, is the most important, that the user adopts the building and makes it her own in this case here, and doesn't need the architect anymore. So in an architect's mind, that's kind of the feeling. And so we shared this dream with visitors that you had last week, and we're going to play this clip here in a second. And these were visitors from Tanzania, and they were from the foothills of the Kilimanjaro. And you had them here, they come every other year, and they visit the building. And they were very interested and actually invited us to come over to their country, which was lovely, and just to share the experience. So again, thank you very much. So
welcome here. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
This all happened spontaneously.
Yeah.
I was on the phone with Mr. Witzer to set up a appointment for me visiting, and then she told me that you're here today.
Yeah,
So we just spontaneously decided to meet.
yeah,
So it's my big pleasure
yeah,
to welcome you here.
yeah,
And me now on behalf of Think Tech Hawaii,
yeah,
where we just talked that we have a similarity in climate,
yeah,
where it rains a lot and the sun shines a lot, but it never gets cold,
yeah,
which is different to this building, where
Yeah.
in this climate it also gets cold and warm.
yeah.
So great to have you here, and maybe you can introduce yourself and your group
Okay.
and why you're here and why you're interested in the building. That would be
Oh.
wonderful.
Thank you to welcome us. My name, I'm Pastor Santaradi Munisi. I'm from Tanzania, Kilimanjaro. As long as you know, Kilimanjaro is the second highest mountain in all of the world. We are here for the mission because we have a partnership with the Church of Hannover and Leipzig.
Oh, yeah.
So we choose to come into this wonderful kindergarten to see how the wonderful building is and what kind of technology they use it. And then I hope we can, because we have that technology is not using a chemical or anything which is against the climate of the world. And now the world are encouraging people to keep environment. And that's why we come to learn in here. And sometimes we can introduce this technology to our area because near the mountain it's so cold. As long as you climb in the mountains, how the cold is.
Okay.
But the lowland of the mountain is hot. So I'm thinking we have a lot of things to learn
Yeah.
together with my delegation.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And your group, also your mothers of many children, so you're also experts.
Yeah, for
In-
me, I'm married with 3 children. First, Shinona has got Lindy, she is 8 years, and my second Gideon is 6 years, and my last one is Jehoshaphat, is 1.7 years. So it's better for me. Also, I'm dealing with the issue of HIV that I attended to university. And study public health diploma, which now I'm using to educate people about the HIV. I'm giving them counseling. Sometimes some of the people come to me and ask if they have ARVs to prolong their lives because people they need privacy, they need somebody confidentiality, not somebody who can expose their issues outside. And we as a pastor, many people that trust so much to come and having advice from us and other things like this. Yes.
That's wonderful.
And as long as you know, in our area, more than 1,200 they have affected with HIV in our area. So most of them, we're dealing with them, telling them what they have to do, the other thing like this.
That's wonderful. So you see in a building sort of this mission of education,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Of making them self-responsible
Yeah.
human beings,
Yeah.
educating them.
This is a good way and say thank you so much to introduce for us this new technology for us.
Thank you
It's our
very
first
much.
time to know
Yeah.
such kind of technology.
Yeah. And I can share that you just invited me to your country, to your culture, which is wonderful.
Yeah, you will come and you will
Truly
see the
appreciate
different technology also in our country.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can copy our technology also to German.
Yeah, no, we can
Because
learn from
everyone,
each other. Yeah.
everyone learn each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's a wonderful slogan. I
Yeah,
really
sure.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
So thank you very much
Thank you.
again.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah.